This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
You're listening to Stewart.
WPSL Port St. Lucie, WSTU Stewart. Time for the Quit Doc Coach's Corner, followed by IRSC basketball tonight. Coach John Messina and the whole crew is here tonight, right?
I have my whole crew here. I got the voice of the Centennial Eagles, Fred Almade here. Welcome again, Fred.
Well, good evening. We'd like to say hi to Greg Wyatt down there in Broward. Hopefully they can get their game started on time.
Yeah, I hope that the other team shows up and everything, so that would be good. But we're going to do our college football wrap-up show that we've been putting off until you've been such a busy guy working all these games here. I couldn't get you in here to do the wrap-up show.
Well, before we even get to college football, I just want to give a shout-out to high school basketball. Last week, and I'm at the Centennial Eagle games, but they played Treasure Coast High School and Port St. Lucie High School, and it was two excellent high school games. Mm-hmm. And even more importantly than that, we had talked with Mike Thomas last week about, the district and how it's going in this area. But the referees did a great job. They really had control of the game. They were hard-fought games. One went to overtime. But it was just a great high school atmosphere. And the refereeing was, I thought, excellent because they kept control of the game, yet let the kids play. So I just want to give a shout-out to the local referees here in basketball. I thought they did a great job. And again, the kids played well. Both teams fought hard. It was Treasure Coast High School and PSL playing Centennial.
And you're right there at the scorer's table, so you see everything.
I see it all, yeah.
And one other thing I'd like to mention is, they have the high school district soccers that are going on. And Vero Beach won the girls' soccer district in this area. And I think Martin County won their area. They upset South Fork, who was undefeated. And a little shout-out to the boys' soccer team at Martin County. My good buddy Brett Hawkins, who's the head baseball coach at Martin County, is the assistant soccer coach. The boys' soccer team ended up, was an 8th seed, beat the number 1 seed, South Fork, last night.
And that's what's great when you get into the districts, no matter what sport.
Yeah.
Basketball, boys and girls will be cranking up here in the next couple weeks. But, again, if you're competitive, 1 and out, especially the first 2 rounds, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and Martin County and South Fork girls soccer teams are both excellent teams. They had tremendous years. I think, South Fork didn't have any losses and Martin County had 1. They're going to end up playing each other in the second round, you would think. All right, before we get to the football, there was an interesting little news brief that came out about college basketball today that I told you on the way over. That I guess they're going to copy a little bit what the women's basketball is doing and also copying what the BCS is doing, is that starting on February 16th, they're going to release the top 16 seeds. Now, this doesn't mean anything except it's going to grab your interest, right?
Well, I think they're trying to follow suit. Because I told you when I saw it last night, the women's bracket, I didn't know they were going to do the men's. And then you told me that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't believe they're doing the men's like that also, but I think they're trying to follow suit how popular college football is. Because when they start with those October rankings in college football, now they're trying to wet your whistle before they get to March Madness.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. I think they're trying to put Joe Lenardi out of business here because, Joe's been making the picks like 95%. And now everybody will have like an insight on making the picks. The difference between the men's and the women's is that with the women's 16 seeds, they're going to host a game if they put in a bid, and I don't see why not, So with 64 teams, then each one of the 16 seeds will have a bracket of 4 teams there, which means a lot. Now, I wonder if down the road the men's don't follow that because some of these games, and we have watched them on TV, some of these first-round games, there's nobody in the stands.
Well, there's nobody in the stands, but they play at big venues. And I think that's one of the things that kind of hurts men's basketball because, as you said before, when they have the 4 regionals and there's all the first-round games, you're looking at 16 different venues.
Right.
And some of those venues are awful big. So, they're pretty expensive. So maybe they'll look at, again, try and give the top 16 a little incentive because they worked all year to get to that point when you got 64. But we'll see. But the women's, right now, they do have the home field advantage, and I think that definitely helps them.
And I can't wait for those first 2 rounds. You remember a few years ago, I always tell people this story. I got involved in one of those pools. I think the one on ESPN, and you pick the teams. And the first day, for some reason, I'm 16-0. Second day, I'm 32-0. All of a sudden, everybody's my friend. My secretary Candy's wedding was on the third day, and I won the first 4 to get up to 36-0. And everybody's definitely my friend. We got our phones out at the wedding. I mean, how many times did you call me that day? You know, who do you got? Who do you got? Then all of a sudden went downhill. I know one of the losses I had was Mercer beating Duke, you know, which is upset. But I was on a roll there for a while.
But that's what makes March Madness, because you have 68, I guess, to start with. But you get into your 64, anything can happen on any given day.
Because it's a one game.
So one and done.
Right. And I mean, you don't see that in too many other sports. I mean, you know, you don't see it in college baseball because they play the regional
best out of 3,
best
2 out of 3. Yeah.
And football, you're not going to get a lower ranked team. I mean, a real lower ranked team that's out of the top 30 that's going to beat, you know, the top ranked teams. But basketball, and I think as you and I were talking about it last show, there's so many teams this year. I mean, you know, the ACC, as usual, is terrific. But then you got the Big East with Villanova, Creighton,
Butler,
Xavier,
Creighton.
Even Seton Hall, Marquette.
Well, again, we've said this for forever. Once they went to the one and done on the college, some teams now, like the Butlers and the Creightons, are making it with guys that play 4 years.
Right.
So where you got Kentucky one and done and 3 and 4 guys in that position, they're reloading, but there's not many Kentuckys out there. Okay. So it kind of puts parity in a main frame now, and it makes it exciting because when you get into the playoffs, sometimes like Villanova last year, you got more experienced players. They ended up winning it, and I think a lot had to do with those kids played together 2, 3, 4 years.
And most of them are back, too, if I'm not mistaken on that.
Yeah, Villanova looks right now they have the experience, and they're playing really well. But you got about 15 teams that have a legitimate shot.
I know. We were talking how good UCLA was, you know, the other day on the phone. And Arizona got a kid eligible who's a big-time player, and they beat him in UCLA.
And, again, you see different teams losing players, guys getting hurt. Yep. So as the year goes on, and, again, you're trying to peak as you get into March, that's what makes it exciting.
One other topic that kind of just popped in my head, I saw on TV today before we get to the college football, the All-Star voting for the NBA players. They made a big deal that, you know, half of it was the coaches, or a quarter was the coaches, quarter was the players, and then the tiebreaker was the fans. Well, it came out on one of the shows. There was 324 players that voted. Do you know 170 did not vote for LeBron James? 150 didn't vote for Kevin Durant. Are they kidding me?
Well, Steve Kerr mentioned that last night the Heat played the Golden State Warriors. And Steve Kerr was asked about that. He said it was a farce.
It is.
And it is. But, you know, again, all-star basketball, if you ever watch it, and they're getting 160 points, I mean, there's no defense. There's no even passing. It's just like first man over.
But they voted for Mo Williams, who's a great guy, but he hasn't played all year. He's hurt. They voted for Ben Simmons, who hasn't played a game yet. You know, who are you kidding?
They're correct in saying it is a farce, but it's kind of funny in a way because a lot of those guys are making a lot of money, and they don't really need the all-star. It is nice to watch them play. You don't want anybody to get hurt. Of course, it's coming up in the next couple of weeks, but I think Steve Kerr had it right that if you're going to play it, make it quote-unquote halfway legitimate. But
well, you know what I think they should do? Sign your name to it. So when you put your vote in, if you say I'm voting for Ben Simmons, put your name on it, and they'll call you out on it.
Or do what baseball does. And remember they did. Whoever won it, you know, got the home field or home court.
Oh, they'll score 250.
Well, again, at least it's some kind of competitiveness. So.
Well, it's a little better than hockey, which go 15-14, right, on the hockey All-Star game?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's really nobody's hitting anybody there.
No, all right, let's go to the college football and a few topics that kind of popped up. Your buddy, Mr. Harbaugh from Michigan, has decided because the NCAA won't let him take his spring training camps outside of the state, he decided to go to Italy. He's going to recruit one of my cousins there, right?
Well, the curious thing is how he came up with playing in Rome, Italy. I mean, he could have went anywhere outside the United States.
They must have a wide receiver.
I don't know.
You know
he
what?
just
Maybe
wants
they
to
have
eat
one
the
of the
food.
soccer players as the kicker.
That was the first thing that when I read it, and he's going over there for, I think, 3 weeks, if I got it correctly.
Are they really going to do football there?
Well, they have to go there for a reason.
Well, you know, if they're going to go for instructional, for academics, for culture, I think that is wonderful. But if they're going to go as a farce for football, just, you know.
Well, basketball teams do it, and you're allowed to go, I think, every 4 years.
But they play.
They do play. They
play
local
games.
teams.
They play those teams.
They are
in.
just going to practice. The NCAA has approved it. I still don't understand why Rome, Italy is the spot he wants to go to. I don't know what facilities
they're going to play the University of Rome.
I don't know. He's taken over like 150 players, coaches, etc.
Now, you tell me every administrator in that school has put in to be a chaperone on that trip.
So
right?
what's Ohio State going to do now?
No.
Or any? I mean,
well,
they're
Ohio
rivals.
State's got to top them. What do you think Ohio State will do to top?
That's what I'm saying.
Ohio State will go to France, right?
One thing about it, Harbaugh is always going to try and one-up whatever. So he started the satellite camps, I guess is what you call them. Everybody else kind of had to follow suit. Like you said, now he's going over there, and coaches across the country, especially the coach on the other state, Mr. Meyer, he's got to be thinking, how do I one-up this one?
He'll go to Paris.
Possibly. You never know. They got to come up with something.
Now, you tell me, what was Urban Meyer's reaction when he read that this morning?
Well, when I read it, I was shocked. So I can't imagine what they thought. And you know, Harbaugh had to leak what he was doing ahead of time.
Oh, so he leaked it to Ohio State.
They might have had an inkling that something was coming.
Yeah, they leaked it. All right, a few other topics here. What do you think about that? You know, we talked about the players skipping the bowl games, you know, to get ready for the, you know, NFL combines. But now you got a lot of players skipping the All-Star games. Deshaun Watson's not playing in the Senior Bowl. What do you think about that?
Well, Miami had a kid, Stacy Cole, he played wide receiver, and he declined to go to the East-West Shrine Bowl. The way I understand it, the combine means so much now that players really don't want to get hurt in the bowls. But when you're at the bowls, it's the practices, not the actual games that help. So somebody that's a possible second, third, fourth round pick can only help themselves, I think, if they go to the bowls. But again, it's the injury aspect that they don't want, and they're all training. So they're training for the combine, which is literally about 4 days.
So they're not going to school and doing their academics.
Oh, they're all anybody that's going drafted or declared.
They're done.
December was the last time they saw a book.
They saw the class. Do you remember way back when they had these all-star games? You had your East-West game, and it was divided Mississippi River, if I'm not mistaken. Then you had the North-South game, the Blue-Gray game, and it was divided by the old Mason-Dixon line. I mean, they have taken those games away and tried to balance them off a little bit, right?
Well, plus they've moved them around because the East-West Shrine game used to be in San Francisco. Now it's over in St. Pete, and then they have the Senior Bowl still in Alabama. But they've kind of moved them around. One thing about these bowls, this tells you how much revenue's in pro football. They can pay the players because they're pros.
Right.
So at one time, $1,000, $2,000 was a lot for these players. Now that's what they're going to be, chump change, if they get drafted. So, again, the money aspect has really changed in the Bulls, and with so much on the line for being drafted and the high value of the NFL being a draft pick, I think their agents are telling them to don't get hurt.
Absolutely. Now think of this other situation that they had. Way back when, they used to have the NFL champion in the summer, right before the first preseason game, play the college all-stars. Now, can you imagine doing that today? So I remember the Dolphins. I remember when Larry Zonka was coming up, I was in college, and he was on the college all-stars, and they had to play whoever it was, the Packers or somebody like that. Can you imagine them doing that today?
Well, I remember, and again, going way back, when you used to have at certain stadiums 2 NFL games playing not one, 2 NFL games back to back. And they would only have half the stands going way, way back about 20, 30 years.
Wow.
Now they're all playing in these mega stadiums.
Yes.
And even preseason, if the fans don't show, they're still paying to go to the game.
Yeah.
So the NFL's making money one way or the other. So it's come a long way in the last 20 or 30 years.
And think, who knows what's going to happen. Another situation, not really for pro football, for college football, and I know they have to make a change, but I don't know if they have to make a drastic change, is the length of the games. The college football championship went over 4 hours. Is that correct?
Well, the NFL, when I watch it this weekend, you can almost count on the halftime being approximately about 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But one of the traditions of college football, that's why we love it, tradition,
Right.
is the bands playing. So that right there, because the bands, they want to give each band at least 8 or 10 minutes. You're looking now at going 20, 25 minutes. So right there, you got an extra 15 minutes. College game uses more passing, it seems, and then they stop the clock after every first down. So I know they've thrown it around for the college coaches to kind of figure out a way, and the administrators, but you're taking away the tradition of what is different between college and pros. And I don't think they can come up with a happy medium because TV still loves both of them, but the length is getting very long.
And I do like, and this is just me talking, I do like the kind of high-scoring games from college. It's a lot more interesting when it's 38-35, and, you very rarely do you see the 10-7 games anymore, All right, let's go to a little bit of a recap of our college football season. I know you're probably counting the days to when they start next year. Who's big-time opening game next year? Is it Florida State? Is Florida State and somebody opening game?
Florida State playing RT, Roll Tide, Alabama.
First game.
First game of the year, and they'll probably be ranked 1 and 2.
Wow.
Alabama 1, Florida State 2.
So let's go to, since it just came out this afternoon, and I know you really studied it. You tried to figure out which games you're going to go to and which days you're going to call in sick at school, is the University of Miami's football schedule.
Well, the ACC put out all their schedules, and being a Cane fan, I always, I'm curious to see what they have. Last couple years, when the schedules came out, and again, I don't think Miami, they can put a couple dates they want. This year's schedule really is going to help them because they play Florida State, their third game of the year, in September.
So this Florida is State. After they play Alabama.
That would be Florida State's first game. It would be Miami's third game.
Be Florida State's second game after Alabama?
Yes, or second or third, because I think Florida State, I haven't seen their schedule, but I know that they have somebody the second game. So the third game of both teams, they're in Florida State. Now, if you think from Florida State's standpoint, they got Alabama their first game and Florida State their third. Miami their third at Florida State. Hypothetically, they could go 2-0, or they could go 0-2. Mm-hmm. Now, they still have the rest of their schedule. How that helps the Canes is in the years past, they've kind of nosedived after they played Florida State. This year, if they win, great, they got it out of the way. If they lose, they have enough time to rebound because they still have 9 games after that. And they have their schedule set that they play Notre Dame at home. They got Syracuse at home. Those are their crossovers, I guess you would call. And the rest of the schedule, there's a bye in there, and they have a Friday night game and a Thursday night game.
And Virginia Tech at home. They don't have to go to Blacksburg,
And
right?
they got it on a Thursday night.
Wow.
Tech's on a Thursday. So I think they have, with the team that doesn't have a quarterback right now, I think they got enough time, stay healthy, teach what's going on, and getting Florida State, quote unquote, out of the way. I think it could help them long term.
So you're saying they got a shot this year?
As always.
Well, you've been saying that, you and my good friend.
But I legitimately think their schedule really sets them up very well.
You always say that, you're a forever young guy. How's your team? They're forever young. We're going to get them next year and stuff. All right, Fred. Top 10 teams as they finish. What would you say your top 10 would be?
All right, we got to go with Clemson.
Right.
Which was a great game, by the way.
Right.
So we have Clemson number 1. Naturally, RT, Alabama, Roll Tide is number 2. So I think everybody can go with that.
Right.
I've been saying for the last 7-8 weeks of the year that I thought USC should be, like if they had a top 8, would be in there. I know they didn't, get to the top 4, but I have USC as the third team. I put Washington 4, and then I put Penn State 5, although that USC-Penn State game was a great game.
Right.
I got Oklahoma 6, Florida State 7. And again, Florida State's another team that I think is really going to hurt next year because Dalvin Cook I thought was great. But again, I got them next. And then I'll throw Ohio State in there at number 9, even though that was an embarrassment. I guess even Urban would say that when they couldn't score a point. And then your number 10, you can pick whoever you want. You got LSU, Stanford, Wisconsin, Oklahoma State. You can kind of throw any of those in there. But, that's how I got it ended.
Basically, I got basically the same thing you got. I got the same teams, just in maybe a little different order. Now, this was the preseason pick by Phil Steele, who's usually the best around, and, his magazine is excellent. These were his top 10 before the season. Alabama, Florida State 2, LSU 3, Oklahoma 4, Clemson 5, Tennessee 6, missed on that one, Stanford 7, Washington 8, Ohio State 9, Mississippi State 10. Mississippi 10. So we missed on that one. And then his next 2 he definitely missed on. 11 was TCU and 12 was Notre Dame. So he definitely missed on those, He had Penn State way, way down there. And another one he missed on that he had very high, he had UCLA at 16. So that was another one. Now, if you had to say your 5 biggest disappointments, which teams would you pick as your 5 disappointments?
Well, Notre Dame's got to be in a top 5. We won't rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Let's just say, give me 5.
Okay.
I'll say Notre Dame's one of the 5. You have to put Oregon in there.
Right.
Because, again, they lost their coach, but also they were disappointment. Michigan State has to be a major disappointment. Personally, I think Tennessee was a disappointment. I thought that they would be much better than what they ended up being, and that was throughout the year. And then again, you can pick it. Look at Arizona State. I think they were a shock, and/or UCLA. So one of those 3 out of the Pac-12, I think, was a major disappointment. So those are my 5 right there.
Right, and also I think Mississippi a little bit. Even though they lost a lot, they played a really tough schedule and lost a lot of close games. I think, what did they finish, 5-5 or 5 and
yeah?
6
At one
and
time
6?
they were 3-3 and ranked in the top 12.
I think they finished 5-7 or something like that, or right around there. But I know they struggled. They lost a big game to Mississippi State at the end. Who would you say, and then, right before we go to our break here, who would you say would be your coach of the year?
I think you have to go with Dabo Swinney.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. I know the coach from Colorado got a lot of votes, and again, he turned that program around. But, to slay the Dragon, to beat RT, Roll Tide, I mean, that was huge, and the game was great. So he's been saying it for years, so I'd have to say my coach of the year would be Dabo Swinney.
You're listening to the Quit Doc Coach's Corner with Fred Almade and John Messina. Greg Wyatt standing by for an IRSC basketball game following this program. We'll be right back with more Coach's Corner in just a moment.
You tell me that you love me and you don't want anything bad to happen to me, but sometimes you do things that I don't understand, like smoking around my friends and me. It makes us feel sick, and my friends say my clothes stink. It really scares me. I know how hard it is for you.
How does the game start sound so far? Yeah, they can hear you. Fred says he likes it. They're going to talk about it, I think. If they talk about it, you want me to pull you in? Uh-oh. All right, we'll be listening in queue.
Conditioning, home of the $76 AC tune-up and safety inspection.
I'm CBS 12 meteorologist Michael Ehrenberg. Skies for this evening and tonight will stay clear. It'll be breezy, getting quite cool. Lows by morning down to about 50. Your Wednesday looking beautiful, sunny to partly cloudy skies. You'll notice much lighter winds tomorrow. Still pleasant, though, with highs in the upper 70s. Fair to partly cloudy tomorrow night, a little warmer with lows in the upper 50s. A mix of sun and clouds, breezy, warmer, low 80s for Thursday. I'm CBS 12 meteorologist Michael Ehrenberg for WPSL Digital 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Thank you, Michael. And weather this hour has been brought to you by Seacoast Air Conditioning, your hometown air conditioning company since 1982. For repairs or a whole new system, call them at 772-466-2400.
Comfort crisis, don't roast, call Seacoast.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
You're listening to WSTU Stewart.
And now back to the Quit Doc Coach's Corner with Fred Almade and John Messina.
We were talking about the coach of the year, and of course Fred mentioned Dabo Swinney, who did a fantastic job, and also the coach out in Colorado. One thing about Colorado, they did lose pretty big their last game and their bowl game. I'm going to give you a long shot as coach of the year. Coach from Army. Right? Won 8 games with Army. They hadn't won more than 2 games the last few years. And more important, they beat Navy, which is like their whole season.
Well, I was going to say that the Navy coach has done a great job.
Oh, every
And he
year.
was, 9-1 until towards the end they kind of
they got hurt. They lost their quarterback. Who was their backup quarterback. So. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you anymore. Coach of the year is anybody that keeps their job.
Yes.
Because they're making so much money.
Well, we had 22 coaching changes, okay? And that was down from 30-something last year. It was a lot less than I thought. The way people were going, they thought there would be a lot more. And the last 2 were non-football related. The coach from Minnesota lost his job, and, over that...
the incident with the harassment of players, I think is what it was.
Right, and his stand on that. And then the coach from California... lost his job because he applied for the job at Baylor, which I thought was kind of unusual, which makes me think that their athletic directors had somebody in mind all the time and they were just waiting for them to open up.
Well, that's big-time college football. What have you done for me lately? Yeah. Now, we talk about the SEC. So they only lost 1 coach. Am I correct?
And one coach was Les Miles, which was in the
early
beginning,
in the year.
Early in the year. Nobody at the end of the year. Now, they had on the SEC network yesterday, they asked which coaches are on the hot seat. And the answer was everybody but Saban and Kirby Smart. And if you think about it, you're right. Both of the Mississippi coaches, Arkansas coach, which every year somehow or another, he kind of has a disappointing year. And you have Texas A&M, you have Auburn, right? And
well, what I'm seeing, and I think this is the trend, they're paying coordinators $1 million as a coordinator, which years ago you wouldn't even get head football coach.
And you and I are sitting here and they're paying them millions
$1 million.
of dollars. I remember that.
So if you look, when they're not firing coaches, they're firing people on their staff.
Right.
So I think the SEC right now is looking at, okay, their coach is really their name, and then when they find out that they need some help, rather than fire the coach, they just change coordinators. And I think that's something across college football. You're seeing guys go NFL to college, and the coordinators are really the ones that are making things happen. Case in point, LSU.
Yes.
Kept their defensive coordinator when they got Orgeron because he came from Wisconsin, paid him a lot of money. Their defense was great. So, again, I think the SEC has kind of started a trend that they're willing to pay millions of dollars and sometimes giving them multi-year deals to switch coordinators, but the coach will stay there until – and I know Tennessee did this too. They got a new offensive coordinator. Scott, that was at Miami last year, he's their new offensive coordinator.
And, Butch Jones is another one that they mentioned. He better be in the SEC championship game or he's gone. And kind of ironic is they're talking about there's a chance that Philip Fulmer might be the athletic director.
And you know that if that happens, he's probably on his last leg.
He's going to bring in his own people.
Well, unless he has a year or something like 10-2, you got to win the East in the SEC.
I wonder if Mr. Manning would be interested in going back to Tennessee.
Well, that's a good question. On the NFL, they were talking about maybe him going to the Colts, and then I think the Colts kind of said no. But just like John Elway, just like Dan Marino, they want to be around the game. Making the commercials is just not making it. I think it's not a money thing for Manning, so it wouldn't be. In some way, you'll start seeing him creep into college. Maybe he would be on the halftime show if he wants to go into college.
The one thing about Peyton Manning, I think he's more of a teacher than the other two. I think he'd really relate to the young college kids and teaching them, and maybe there's a position there for him, but who knows. Going back, and I don't think this is a question now, the best conference by far was the ACC.
Yeah, you would have to look, and I think even though bowl games sometimes are insignificant, when you look at the way the Bulls ended up, I think it was 9 wins and 3 losses for the ACC. The key was that they won, the whole title. So they have the person there. Right. You look at teams like Miami that had big bowl wins. Right. FSU had big bowl wins. So, I think it's marquee that really helped. The SEC, I think, is a little jealous, as our friend the Pirate said from Washington State, if you heard that comment of him.
Yes, I did.
So, again, I think the playing ground is more on even terms, other than the fact that you got to do it year in and year out. We'll find out this fall if they're legit, meaning the ACC.
And I told you, in the preseason handbook that I read with Phil Steele, they list the attendance at some of these schools. And if you look in the SEC, how many schools they have, and it's sometimes it's unfathomable that they have a good number of schools that their attendance is over 100,000. I mean, you think of that, some of the schools, in the ACC could have a crowd of 50,000. That's great. Well, how about double that,
But again, that's tradition of the South, because if you look at where those schools are located, meaning look at Athens, you're looking at Gainesville, you're looking at Knoxville, Tuscaloosa. That's it. That's
the only thing they have.
That's the only thing they have. The school, and then they build those stadiums years ago, tradition.
Right.
And that brings the alumni back. If the alumni don't come, they pay the money. They have a great agreement with CBS. That Saturday 3:30 spot has been there 15 years.
Right.
So, you got to overcome that by winning with the ACC. And we'll see what happens in the future.
One of the best locations and best venues that I have ever been for a college game is when I was growing up, my dad took me up to West Point. And I saw an Army game in early November with snow flurries. What an atmosphere up there. I mean, that's something I'd love to do again, or go to Annapolis. And it takes over the whole day, or not a whole weekend, for some of these teams. All right, how about our dark horse and our surprise picks for next year? And we're saying it here on January 24th.
Well, do you want to go from who we think the top teams will be coming back?
Yes.
And then go?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a big believer, whether it's the pros and even now in college, that if your quarterback comes back and they're fairly good, that's really going to be a deciding factor. Now, sometimes it's a running back on college, but as you looked at the bowl game championship between Clemson and Alabama, Watson was there 3 years, had produced. Alabama's quarterback played great, but he was a true freshman.
Right.
So my top 5 teams coming back, in no particular order, but I'll go through it. I have Alabama as number 1, because until on a yearly basis somebody knocks them or Coach Saban retires, they're going to be in the top 5, but their quarterback's back. So I have them at 1. I put Ohio State at 2 because they were real young, and their quarterback's coming back. So he decided to come back. Barrett decided to come back. Right. Florida State has a ton of talent. I have them at number 3.
And their quarterback's coming back.
And their quarterback is coming back, although I do think Dalvin Cook loss is really going to take an adjustment on them. But I got them 3. Oklahoma 4. Their quarterback's back.
And he's excellent.
And he's excellent. And again, their weakness is going to be some on the defense. And then, again, looking at the quarterback, USC, that kid that they had out there.
He's terrific.
He's terrific, and he's coming back. So those would be my top 5. Wow. If you want to throw another one in there, you could put Penn State. what they proved with their quarterback who's coming back. So if you want to put them at 5A or some combination of that, that's what I would do.
You know, I don't think Penn State gets as much credit from where they came from after the Sandusky scandal as where they're at right now. And I know the coach there now has done a great job, but I think a lot of people forget the job that Coach O'Brien did is just holding these people down, and you know how many people would take that job. And also talking about replacing coaches. How would you like to be the guy that replaces Nick Saban?
Well, you know that time's going to come sooner or later.
Right. You know who I would like to be? The guy that replaces Nick Saban. Right. Not the first guy, the second guy.
What's going to be interesting is whenever he decides to give it up, how many people turn the job down? Because at one time, Bobby Biden, all he wanted to do when he was in his prime at Florida State was be the Alabama football coach.
Right.
When the time came and they asked him to be the football coach, now this was after Coach Bryan had a couple of people that didn't pan out, he looked around and said, no, I want to stay at Florida State. So, you know, even though the job itself is attractive, I don't know. It's going to take a special person to follow that.
And the expectations is you better get to the SEC championship and win 10 games every year. I can't see anything lower than that.
And again, we're looking down the road, but that's going to be a tough one to fill. And they're getting a new athletic director.
Right.
They hired a gentleman from Arizona who had been in the SEC.
Right.
So, you know, in the back of his mind,
he's got to be thinking,
you know, what happens if. I don't know when that day is going to come, but you have to have it in mind.
So as soon as he gets there, he reports to Nick Saban, right?
Well, or the other way around. Yeah, the AD reports to
the AD reports to Nick Saban. Yeah. That's what I mean.
I would assume that's.
I would assume
that's the process.
That's the process.
Yeah.
So, one of the schools that I think, and I watched them at the end of the year, and I watched them in their bowl game, was Kansas State, with 78-year-old Bill Snyder coaching. And boy, wouldn't that be a nice way for him to get out, who has been such a class act in college football, have a great team and go out. You know, the Big 12 is very winnable, you know, and we're going to stop calling it the Big 12, right, until they get 12.
We can't figure that out
I can't figure it. And the Big 10's not Big 10. Don't get me started with that. I'm totally confused.
You know, at one time, college football, their coaches dictated who the teams were. Now that's kind of, you know, with Coach Biden, Coach Paterno going, that's kind of changed a little bit. College basketball is going through that cycle probably in the next 5 years with the coaches that they have, you know, with Boeheim, Krzyzewski,
Roy Williams.
Yeah. You know, you have a lot of marquee coaches probably in the next couple of years that go out. But it is nice to see Coach Snyder year in and year out. And he came back at like the age of 70, and he's turned them around. So you don't see that too often on college football because they just don't give you the time.
And you never hear,
last.
You know, knocking on wood, you never hear Kansas State having a problem. I mean, the kids, you know, just adore him.
Yeah, it's a great story.
You know, and something like that. But also, they had a few people switching off the bowl committee, and one person they put on that I think you and I respect is Frank Beamer, who I think is going to do an excellent job, and you know, he knows football. Is there any changes that you would like to see in the bowl committee?
Well, again, you and I talk about this a lot, that when they have, just like a committee, if you had a local committee trying to pick, you can't tell me you don't take bias with you. Now, Frank Beamer is an ACC guy, although he's from Alabama.
Right.
He played for Alabama years and years ago. So I think that we're talking about how strong the conferences is. I think that in the back of his mind, Coach Beamer would have to somewhere have a bias for the ACC. But time will tell, because, you know, again, when we looked at Ohio State, how they got in this year, I think you had a bias that Ohio State was maybe better than what they were, didn't have to play to get in.
Right.
I think that's something the committee's going to have to look at.
They got beat very bad. Penn State didn't get in and played a great game against USC
and won the Big Ten. They won
the championship. Or just, you know, if you're going to do it that way, don't even play the conference championship.
Yeah, you know? they have to talk amongst themselves. But I like the idea of Frank Beamer there.
Yes, and one thing, watching some of the college basketball games last night, and when they do the standings, say the SEC ACC, they don't break them up into divisions. It's one big 16 teams or 12 teams, whatever. It's not broken up in division. So you don't have a conference championship. You have a conference playoff. Is that correct?
Correct. So, and again, college football and college basketball is trying to emulate college football. College football is trying to take some of the things that college basketball is doing. Yeah. Because, again, your AD has got both sports. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years, especially with the TV money.
The TV money.
Like how they're going to compete between the two for the TV money.
Right. Now, Greg Wyatt just sent us a little message from, he's down at Broward Community College. And I don't know if we can get him on the phone. He's down there waiting for the pregame show. And he had a little message from Fox Sports that say they want to propose to change the basketball halves into quarters. Greg, are you there?
Yeah, certainly am.
Well, I hear you loud and clear. I can hear those balls bouncing in the background. One's getting kind of close to you. All right, explain what you kind of sent us the message.
Well, basically what Fox has asked the television networks, or I should say the NC2A, is to break up the game like the women have into quarters. And then, of course, they can stack more commercial time in there. And they're saying that this is going to make it survivable, was the terminology at Fox, to continue with the television rights being what they are. So survivable is the operative word.
Does that mean, I kind of noticed that in the end of the games, the end of the halves, or especially at the end of the game, there are so many timeouts. And, maybe this would speed it up. I know I've been watching a lot of the women's game, especially at University of Connecticut. I love the quarters. What do you think, Fred?
Well, when you watch the NBA game, Greg, they do the same thing, at the quarters. And the game flows better. You don't have a timeout at the 4-minute, 8-minute, 12-minute, 16-minute time, TV timeout, the way the college does. So I think it makes for an easier viewing of the game. And then revenue-wise, you can have more 1-minute commercials in that 3-minute span between the quarters. So I can see the money part. Of course, everybody wants to make the money, but I like the way the game flows.
Now, you're at the junior college game tonight. Why don't you ask, and let us know in the weeks ahead, ask the coaches there what they think about it, because it would eventually go down to them also, Greg.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'll have to ask Charlie on the bus going back up, and also, of course, Bob down here, as Fred knows him very well. Bob Starkman is a 20-year coaching veteran, and, he's got this great team down here. It's they have an alias. They call themselves Broward, but as he said, we are actually the Queen's Bahama Seahawks. He's got a couple very good Bahamian players on this team from Abaco, and then of course obviously as Fred also knows very well, he recruits very well in New York City.
Well, Bob's an ex-New York cop, so he knows everybody
that's right.
in New York City. So he's just expanded his recruiting base, that's all.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. But, it is going to be very interesting to see. And I will ask the coaches at this level to see what they'd like. The other thing that Fox proposed was an extra TV timeout. So I think, of course, obviously, when we get media timeouts at this level, the officials give us 10 and 15 or 15 and 10. I think what they are going to be asking for is even if they break it up into quarters, a TV timeout at 3 or 4, somewhere down there.
You know what I'd be interested to find out, Greg, is that's Fox. What does ESPN think?
What does CBS think? Who has the players? Yeah.
Well, I'm sure if Fox is floating the trial balloon, I'm sure there have been discussions with every single network that's televising. Keep in mind, guys, ESPN is kicking off the new ACC network next year. So I'm sure everybody would like to see something in place by the time that network starts. My friend, who is the commissioner our assistant commissioner of the Mountain West Conference, says they're going to try and resuscitate their television network along with the newly revised Western Athletic Conference to combine those two. So, I mean, you're going to even have regional sports networks dipping down to smaller colleges. It's very interesting. But, I mean, if it's economical, they'll do it.
You know what I noticed when Mike Thomas and I were broadcasting the Martin Bowl, great football game over, Martin County and South Fork.
Sure.
And they were televising it also. Now,
Yes.
again, they were televising on local television from Palm Beach County.
Yep.
The players and the coaches were having a very difficult time adjusting to the TV timeouts.
Red hats.
And
Yes.
so was I. And Mike was, we're ready to go. They're ready to go. They're coming up to the line of scrimmage. The guy's holding them. And they're standing at that line of scrimmage sometimes for almost a minute before they were ready to go because they were doing long commercials. And boy, did they stretch out that game. We started an hour and a half late because of weather, but that game was close to over 3 hours for a high school game. And it was funny. I was listening to somebody. They were talking about the lengths of the football games, which we mentioned before, and we're talking about lengths of all the sports right now. The first Super Bowl, where you had the Packers play the Kansas City Chiefs, was
I was there.
Greg was there, and I don't know if you had your stopwatch there, but it was 2 hours and 37 minutes. Now you think of that. You're just past halftime in a college game on that. 2 hours and 37 minutes. So, I mean, it is a little bit too long. I don't know what they can do. College basketball is great until you get to the end. Because, and in the pro game, they're calling a timeout strategically to move that ball into half court. College, they don't do that. But it's just that, the final minute, if it's close in college, can take 15 minutes. And that's something that they're going to lose viewers from. Pros are going to lose viewers from. College games that start now, the Saturday night games, the prime games on ABC and ESPN are starting at 8:30 and they're over after 12. So there's something that they have to do. I don't know what it is. Could they possibly run the commercials, Greg, like a ticker underneath as plays going on?
It's interesting because if you were, was it Indy Racing League that was doing the split screen?
Well, they
Yes.
did they do that for the
you never
NASCAR?
lose the race.
Some of the NASCAR did
Yes,
that too.
NASCAR.
Right, NASCAR did that,
Yeah.
where they had the split screen, and
Yeah.
you would see the race going on, and they had the split screen. So maybe that is an option.
I think that would be great. I mean, you're going to lose viewers. And even though we love it, we love to see all these sports on TV, we're being oversaturated. We are. There's so many games. I mean, sometimes I count and I'll put a plug in for DirecTV. Sometimes, I get 50-something games a weekend, and there's not many teams I don't get. So, I mean, but if these games are going for 3 and 4 hours, they're all going 3. If they're going 4 hours, there's got to be some way that they can be shortened up. Now, again, you don't want to take away the halftime in college because
Not
it's
college
so
football. You want that.
you want
tradition.
those bands. You want whatever alumni they're doing. The pros, I don't even know if they have bands at pro games anymore, right?
This weekend at 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they were back on.
They're
Yeah.
back on, So I don't know, Greg. So how's IRSC doing? What's their record going into this game tonight?
Going into this game, IRSC is in a place that we haven't been and seen in a long, long time since Joe Sanchez's club in 2011. And we weren't there long then, but we've been here for a couple weeks now. IRSC is 5-1. They're 14-5 on the year. We lost to Palm Beach State, which has been a nemesis of ours for the last 3 years, have not beaten Palm Beach State since February of 2013. But Broward, these games, I don't care where they are. We had a barn burner up in Fort Pierce just about a week and a half ago, and that really was an amazing game. After we beat a very, very strong and nationally ranked Eastern Florida squad, it was the Broward Seahawks giving us everything we could handle as IRSC won it 83-82. Now, what's very interesting is that they have a team player on Broward who is leading the country with 12 rebounds a game. Adam Traore. He's 17 points and 12 rebounds, so he's one of the stars for Broward.
Now, how many teams, when you go into the playoffs, does everybody make it, or is just a certain amount of teams make the playoffs?
We've got a Southern Conference tournament is back, and so with that, it's the top 2 teams. And actually, the team that's in first place will get a bye, and then the rest of the tournament is fought from the second team down. So, it should be very, very interesting, and it's going to be very difficult the rest of the way. So we'll see what happens here at Broward. The game has been moved up from 7:30 to 7:15. So we're getting ready to start, I guess, at 7:15.
Well, Greg, thanks a lot for calling in, and we wish IRSC the best of luck today, and we'll see you soon.
You betcha.
All right, so finishing up here, Fred, which conference do you think had the most disappointing year?
Well, I think the Pac-10 did originally, but USC kind of came on strong, as did Washington, who was in the Final Four. But I think you saw a lot of teams, Oregon, Arizona State, that kind of just didn't pan out. California,
yes,
they just didn't play very well. Now, again, Colorado was a byproduct of that because UCLA. In fact, UCLA changed their offensive coordinator last week. They took the Jed Fish, who was at Miami about 3-4 years ago, who went to Michigan in the pros a little bit. He's their new offensive coordinator. So, again, I think the Pac-10, 12, whatever you want to call them, the old Pac-8, that they were the most disappointing to me.
I got to say, in a way, it's got to be the SEC because you had Alabama, and then you had Alabama. I mean, in my estimation. I mean, Florida, yes and no, their defense was terrific. I mean, Tennessee, if you look who had a season above expectations, well, it wasn't Tennessee. It wasn't Missouri. Kentucky, I would say yes. Vanderbilt, no. Auburn, probably no. LSU at the end, yes. A&M, no. Arkansas, definitely no. And the 2 Mississippis, definitely no. So how many achieved above expectations? Not too many.
I think their bars was set so high. Remember 3-4 years ago when they had everybody in there. It's hard to sustain that bar. Right. Now, our old friend, we mentioned him before, Mr. Leach out at Washington State, made the comment that he thinks that they're overrated. His team next year is one of my dark horses to get into the Final Four from Washington State. So, he's got his quarterback back, and he throws it around like crazy.
Okay, so if we can have a Washington State, Kansas State game next year, we called it. All right, I'd like to say bye to everybody out there. Thank you so much for listening. Fred, thank you as usual, okay? And we'll see everybody soon.
Hey, John, how about a 3-minute media timeout?
We can use that. I can use that. Thanks, Cliff.
Good break for the broadcast. Yeah, all righty. You've been listening to the Quit Doc Coach's Corner with Fred Almade and, of course, John Messina, with a cameo appearance of Greg Wyatt, who's out at an IRSC game that we're about to get a pregame show going. Stay tuned. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.